What's up, everybody? Here we are. Stache Talk on a Monday night, 9 o'clock. We've had a few things go down. I wasn't sure when I was going to be able to make this video, but I decided just to stop putting it off, suck it up, and let's talk about it, right? So you can jump right in. If you guys want to go ahead and jump in the comments and let me know what your reactions are. What your comments are, what your thoughts are, what's the burning topic we think we need to talk about tonight, going back to the draft where we probably got a few more players than people were expecting. Our second round pick, the number guy we got at 37, got some potential, obviously. Some depth at the 4 position, hopefully in the future. So good things, good things to be talking about at the draft overall, considering what they had to work with. Obviously, there was a shakeup in the scouting department and in the front office. So a lot of people probably didn't see coming. And obviously, the big elephant in the room, you guys all know, no secret over the last few years of doing the show, who my ride or die favorite fan pretty much of all time as Lightning players was number 17, Alex Killorn. It definitely hurts to see him go out to Anaheim. It's a great deal for him. Certainly, I don't even think he expected to get that much on the open market. But Anaheim has a cap space and a bunch of young kids, and regardless of what everybody else is saying about Killorn, he still had his last two seasons were his best seasons of his career. Last year even being better than the year before last. So he still has plenty of hockey. He knows how to play the right way, obviously, and there's some good young talent that I think he's going to have fun playing with out there. That being said, it hurts. It hurts. I'm sitting here. I've got Cap Friendly pulled up on my second screen, and there's 2 glaring contracts that I mentioned when they went down that I thought were going to hurt us, basically this year and maybe going into next year even. So we'll get to that. That being said, it's the first time I've been live since the end of the playoffs. Miss you guys. It's been kind of rough dealing with no Lightning hockey. It was rough watching the Panthers go so far. It was even more rough watching Vegas win. But hey, we had some good hockey in the playoffs. As long as the Canadian team didn't win, and as long as the first round loss to the Leafs was as far as they went, that was good with me. Boys definitely got some time off this summer that they desperately needed. We'll definitely see pretty much 100% healthy roster, hopefully, coming in to this year. There was no major injuries that needed significant attention in the offseason this year. So those are all good things. Obviously, we still have our core. We still have our top line. We still have our captain. We still have our goalie. And we still have, a couple of good stalwarts on that blue line that can be a good foundation for us. I still think this is a team that is going to be right there contending for another run at the Cup. Absolutely. But, the forward line, it's going to be interesting to see some of these new guys out here next year. And while we have lost arguably one of our most important players in the top 6, I do think that the bottom 6 has been strengthened. I'm right here already talking about how we've improved our 3rd and 4th line. Some of that's addition by subtraction, I think, a little bit. No offense to the Maroon fans out there. And even Corey Perry, went and got his big payday. And, JBB definitely had his back up against the wall. But, I mean, the fact that he got even any kind of a pick or any kind of asset for a pending unrestricted free agent, 2 days before free agency or 3 days, whatever it was, I feel like was a really good move. So I guess we can get right to it. We've kind of already talked about Killorn going to Anaheim. And that impact is going to be felt for a couple years, I think. Just in that second line, that second line was so steady. Your top six, you knew what they were, you knew what you had. That being said, I already see people talking about Sheary, Connor Sheary. We picked him up. He spent last year, 2 years in Washington, spent some time in Pittsburgh before that, played with Crosby, played with Malkin, played with Ovechkin. So you know he can play with the top line guys. You know he can play with the top line talent. 3 years at $2 million a year. Um, I I think he'll be good. Um, and that'll fill out the top six. I think I still would be curious to see what they do with Nick Paul because while Cirelli was injured, he was on that second line with Stamkos and Kloin, and that's when he was playing his best hockey last year. When he got put down on that third line and was kind of in between and didn't have a 100% clear cut role, I think that's when his game started to suffer. He got in his head a little bit too much. And now I bring up what I was talking about earlier, and I'm still going to go back to the Anthony Cirelli and the Mikhail Sergachev extensions. Um, Cirelli kicked in this year making $6.25 million. Sergachev is making $8.5 million. I still think that's about $1 million, $1.5 million too much for each guy. And if that money was still here, then Alex Corn would still be here. So that's just me. I'm notorious for getting behind JBB and kind of being a rah guy for him, and trust me, or trust him and make the moves that he makes. He's the guy that does the job. But I've said since day one that both of those guys were overpaid, absolutely overpaid. So I think that's kind of nipping us in the bud right here, nipping us in the butt, actually, not in the bud, because it's coming back to bite us in the butt, I guess, actually, right now. The interesting thing is, I think Cirelli, that's all subjective, honestly. Like, who is the best in the playoffs if you don't just look at points or actual production? I don't know. I still think that whatever he brings to this team, he still hasn't hit his potential that everyone has always talked about. Cirelli could be this, Cirelli could be that, Cirelli could be that. I still don't see him reaching that potential yet, and yet now he's getting paid as if he has. And to me, that's the biggest issue. It's not necessarily that I don't think he isn't incredibly valuable to this team. I mean, he's your second line center without a doubt, and it's everyone keeps saying give him time. He's 25. He's been here for 5 years, man. You know what I mean? He's been here to the point where I really think he should be much more consistent and much more of a threat on the score sheet. Not just being a guy that's good for draws and possession. Not, he needs to step up and really fill in some of that offense we're going to lose from Cologne, because Cologne has been playing absolutely great hockey the last 2 seasons. But again, he's my favorite, so I definitely look at him with a little bit of rose-colored glasses. The one guy I didn't forget to mention was Ross Colton. Also was traded. His rights were he was traded to Colorado. Again, I think that's another one of those guys that, given the opportunity, he didn't quite reach his potential. And when we were looking at the fact that we probably needed 3 or 4 forwards going into the season, the money he was going to demand was going to probably take up at least 2, if not 3 roster spots in that forward group. So, it's tough whenever you see guys that have had impacts, especially in the postseason, as he has. He's had a couple of huge playoff goals, but I totally agree. Here in the comments once again, Colton's has been the same ever since he scored in that Panthers goal, and he has been a ghost. And he's another guy that I think is a top 6 guy, but on this team, that top 6 has been ironclad for the last four seasons or so, right? And bringing Brandon Hagel in to replace, Pally. Maybe we didn't see that coming. Maybe we thought it was going to be a Ross Colton, but Hagel has definitely shown that he deserves to be on that top line. So, I think that he really did. Ross Colton did kind of regress on this team the last 2 seasons, really. So, good for him. He goes to another organization where he'll get a chance to win and be competitive. Another great market up there. Colorado, Denver is like my second home. So, it's good for him. So yeah. And it's good to see a few other people agreeing with me that I think that both of these guys, Sorelli and Sergachev, have been overpaid a little bit, and I think that was and I said it then, that was Killer's money. That was the money they were going to need to re-sign Killer, and and that's what it is. And I don't know that the Lightning had more. If they would offer 3.5 for 8 years, maybe so, but I just don't know that. I don't think Killer wanted to sign an 8-year contract. I don't think he wanted to commit to that kind of term because he isn't getting any younger. He is, I think, now the oldest guy on the Anaheim team. I was looking at it. He's the top paid guy right now, until Zegras gets his new deal, which he will be the highest paid guy. But and I definitely think the cap was should still be higher. I don't understand why the NHL owners and the NHLPA can't figure out a way to get that escrow that they owe the owners to get the COVID seasons were played basically on the owner's dime. And that's why all that revenue is going to pay them back and not going to the salary cap increase. I'm no guru on salary cap, how it works and all that, but that's the basic gist of it. Is the main reason it hasn't gone up is the NHL itself still owes the owners for revenue borrowed to make the 2020 and 2021 seasons happen. I did hear some rumblings out there that NHLPA has a new director starting this season, and he was saying things that there was some HR situations from the players, some claims or something that they might be able to rescind, and then maybe the cap would have gone up more this year. I still think it's ridiculous that they couldn't figure out a way to get up by more than $1 million for the third year in a row. It's if it's $3 million next year, that would be great. It should. I was hearing last year that this year was going to go up by $3 million. So I'm not going to hold my breath. Waiting to see what it goes up by. The sheer fact of it is that the Lightning are going to be up against it again next year when you look at the fact that Hagel is going to need a new deal and Stamkos is going to be a UFA as well. I do think that Hagel can probably be kept around on a Braden Point type of bridge deal, maybe 3 or 4 year deal, and then clearly the salary cap, if it goes up again this season like it needs to by $3 million, that's good for the future, and say okay, back with some money to maybe play with Hagel, looking forward to the future, and Stamkos making $8.5 million right now. I think that number will probably actually go down. I don't think he's going to want more money. I think he'll want to stay here, and of all the people we've seen, he will take less money to stay, and and again, it will be in the interest of the team. It'll be what the captain does is he'll always lead the way for that, and we know he's not going anywhere. There's nobody in the league that's more important that he plays for the same team his entire career right now than Steven Stamkos, I think, except maybe for we got Sid and Ovi, obviously. But other than that, those are the 3 guys that aren't going to wear more than one sweater. So that being said, someone asked, Cooch is signed through 26-27, so we still have him for another 4 seasons, and Braden Point's obviously past that. So, and another guy that we talk about, we could sit here and nitpick because I'm sitting here looking at the numbers. I think Cernak is another guy that maybe they expected the cap to be up a little bit, and also his health not to be as much of an issue as it has been. You know, I think that's the big thing with Cernak is that 5.2 million isn't necessarily too much for him. He's still young and he's done what he needs to do on that top four. But he's got to be playing all 82 games, And I know that hit from Bunting was a dirty shot, right to the head. But he's got a history of concussions and head trauma as it is, and so I thought that was a big factor in that series against the Maple Leafs, giving up those leads. Cernak not being on the ice, I think, was a big factor in those 3 games where the Lightning gave up the lead at home. So here we are. We're looking at the top 6. Well, we'll circle back around to some of these guys and what they might be making here. But as of right now, we're probably looking at a top 6 first line of Cooch, Point, and Hagel. Second line of Stamkos, Cirelli, and Connor Sheary. And I would imagine that third line, if we get him signed, will be Paul, Yusamont, and Jeannot. So, which would leave Archibald, Glendening, and whoever they decide coming out of camp. Maybe we signed Logan Brown, who was a previous first-round pick by the Ottawa Senators back in 2016. But it depends on what happens in camp, and of course, JBB came out publicly and said that the 7 defensemen that they had was the 7 defensemen they were going to start the season with. And here I am looking at 9 defensemen on the roster as of right now. So they went and signed Calvin DeHaan. We really thought maybe Bogosian would maybe move, even though he's got a modified no trade clause. We thought maybe they might find a way to move him. But he's not making that much money, and he is a veteran guy. It could be that, maybe that 7th healthy scratch guy that comes in and out. I think Radish definitely showed that he is going to be fine playing in that top 6. And then it's really going to come down to what they think about whether it's Philip Myers or Hayden Fleury or Calvin DeHaan, who they signed as a free agent coming out of Carolina last year, if they think he still has something to offer. So once again, it'll be real interesting to see where this shakes up. Development camp's going on right now for the younger guys, so that you never know what can happen with that as well. As of right now, Jeannot has not where is he at? Has not accepted the offer sheet yet. And I think it's definitely going to be tricky because as of right now, the Lightning are pretty much right at the cap space right now. So they're right at their full cap hit right now is 87,400,000, and that is the salary cap. So it's gonna looks like maybe one or two of these guys is gonna come off of the defense, and I think they still have some long-term IR from the Seabrook contract. Again, it's not my strong suit, the salary cap, but I think they might have some wiggle room still. Maybe, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Philip Myers, I think, is still a big question mark. They're paying him over $1 million, almost $1.5 million, and they haven't really felt like he's been worthy of getting in the lineup on a regular basis. This is the third year he's been with the team now, I believe, going into his 3rd year with us. Came in halfway through, I think, 2 years ago. So there's some question marks. Hayden Fleury, he's going into the last year of his contract that he signed initially with the Lightning, and I feel like he's kind of been also the odd man out. So yeah, it's going to be interesting because they have 12 forwards, including Jeannot right now. So I really think that I'm not sure. To me, that's just the biggest conundrum right now of this whole free agency is the fact that Jeannot has not been signed yet. I don't know what he is expecting. I don't know what he could be looking for. He has basically hardly any history in the NHL, and I don't think he has any real bargaining power personally. So it's very curious as to why this deal hasn't been done yet. I've tried to defend JBB since he made that deal, saying he sees things that we don't always see. But as of right now, if he goes to arbitration, that might be the best thing for us. He's a restricted free agent, so something's gonna have to get there. Or no, I don't think he's arbitration eligible. He would have already gone through it, I think. Again, he is a restricted free agent, so it's all about other teams have to match at least our offer if he signs somewhere else. But as far as our backup goalie, that is someone a lot of people are talking about, and he is what he is. He's a league minimum backup. It's. I don't think we expected anything else this year with what we were looking at in the salary cap that the Bolts were going to be able to do. Johansson, he's a backup for a reason. He's playing for league minimum for a reason. You can go do research on him and whatnot. And so for some reason, he's not actually on the cap friendly roster yet. So, I don't have a quick link to him right now. I can go over to the Lightning page real quick and pull it up. I had it open and I closed it earlier. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, I still think as far as top six forwards and top four defensemen are still very strong. I still think we pretty much have one of the best top sixes in the NHL, at least in the top 10, if not the top 7 or 8 teams. I agree. I don't know. I'm not as versed on the backup goalies in the NHL, and probably because we have been spoiled with Vasilevsky being so dynamic and such a shutdown and being who he is. But I mean, he's Johansson, 6'5", 220, so good size, fits in that kind of ethos of the goaltender that we like to have. We like to have those big guys that are 6'5", 6'6". And I don't know that he's got the experience to talk about Matthew Roscoe. Yeah, I don't know if he's a 25 games a year guy. He's coming off a season where we show that Vasi needs more rest. Vasi needs more maintenance. Vasi needs to be a little bit more aware of his health going through the regular season. And he said that he wants to be. He says he's aware of it. He's recognized the fact that he probably looks at himself too much as a bulldozer or a machine that you just keep beating the shit out of and keep going to work every day. And he's more like a clock. You got to keep him tuned. You got to keep him clean. You got to keep it maintained. And it's hard to do when you don't have a backup goalie that can go out there and do the job for 20, 25 30 games, depending on what happens. If he goes down, we are screwed. We are screwed. Except for the fact that he does have a really decent cap hit. So if it's a long-term thing, there's enough room to try to go find someone else that's a lot more serviceable. But yeah, I still think that's our biggest weakness right now is our backup goalie, and I'm not quite sure what that defensive core is going to look like. And what do we do if they don't get a deal done with Jeannot? Like, do we go down there and throw it in JBB's face? Because that everyone's already trying to. After all the brilliant moves he's been able to make the last 3 or 4 seasons, that still is a glaring mistake to just about everybody. And I'm just not sure what that fourth line is going to look like right now without Jeannot. There's some pretty young guys now out there. And I'm really high on Isamont. I truly am. I think we saw towards the end of the season what he can provide for this team when he came back after that concussion protocol in the series against the Leafs. Once again, he showed that he has, he has what's going to fill in for this team and what we need as a third line center for sure. So yeah, I'm fine with Isamont. I think Archibald is also a pretty solid veteran guy on a fourth line, and Glenn Denning, again, another, I think, serviceable fourth line guy. He's gritty. He's physical. He can still skate, I think, a little bit better than both Perry and Maroon could. So, that's great. It's definitely a little bittersweet seeing that school bus line all, make their way out of town this year. Belly, I think he was a very underrated guy on that fourth line and in the role he played. And Perry was still showing some decent signs of good hockey, especially early on in that series against the Maple Leafs. So, Bogo or Maroon's a big heart guy, and he came in. He came in and really brought what this team needed in the locker room, and I think his spirit lives on. So him moving on is what it needs to be. It's strange that they retained a little bit of salary for him, but he was only making $1 million, I think, was his contract for this season. So by eating any of that, it's kind of a tough pill to swallow. But there you go. You got to make sure that Jeannot signs, right? That's all there is to it. Like, you're gonna walk away if you're JBB with ostrich egg on your face if you don't get this deal done with Jeannot in terms that are beneficial of the Lightning and not in beneficial of him per se, right? It's got to be a team contract, not a player contract. The guy just hasn't shown, regardless of what you gave up for him, he hasn't shown it. And it's I don't know, man. It's hard. I'm still, like I said, I'm still going through it with all the rest of you guys. I'm still reeling a little bit. I've done my reading up on these guys. I've seen where I understand how they could fit. I guess it's tough being a fan of a team that's been able to be fairly solid these last 5 or 6 years, starting to see one by one these guys have had to walk on down the road or go elsewhere because of salary cap, and had things gone the way they should have, it's hard to sit back and not live in that that world a little bit of what we would have if the salary cap had been going up by $3 or $4 million a year as it should have been the last 4 years. If we had that extra $12 million right now, what would this team look like, right? It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard not to think about that. But that being said, I do feel like Shiri has the ability to come in and make an impact, and I think $2 million a year for a guy like him, I think was a great deal. I thought that was definitely probably the best move that JBB has made in this offseason so far. And Todd, I totally agree. Here in the comments, you're talking about only 8 players left from the 2021 Cup. We're only 2 years later, and that really hurts. That hurts. Just plain and simple, it hurts. And I don't know. We'll see what happens this season because I still think I think that there's possibilities that there's still some moves made going through the season at the trade deadline. Who knows? And I honestly, just real quick, going back to Killorn, Anaheim has something like $28 million in cap space available right now. So I don't think that they're going to give Zegras, that $9 or $10 million contract. I think he'll probably be making more than Killorn, but probably around $8 million or so. So they're still going to have a lot of contract cap space, and I wouldn't be surprised if Killorn maybe gets moved at this trade deadline and they eat some of that that money, or maybe next year. He does have a modified movement clause even out there, but yeah, we'll see what happens. That's a lot of money that they paid Alex Killorn, and who knows if they see him being there for all 4 years with that money, or if he kind of has a strategy in a way to try and maybe get back here after the cap goes up the next 3 seasons. So anyways, that's just me still going through it and knowing basically since a week before the draft that Killer wasn't going to be here. The longer it went with him not signing that deal, the more obvious it was that the Lightning just didn't have the money and the term that he wanted. I think he only wants to play another 4, maybe 5 years at most. And, given an 8-year contract, that means half that money, regardless of what it looks like, you're not getting that money if you retire before the end of your contract. So I definitely think that there's a chance that Killer only plays maybe 2 years out in Anaheim and then finds his way back probably here. But that being said, we're here talking about this upcoming 2023-24 season. I don't know about it. I don't know about anybody else, but I also saw the last episode of Lightning Recharge on YouTube when it premiered last week. And that was really hard to watch because it was called Out of Time. And it was basically just recapping the playoffs. And by playoffs, I mean 6 games. Yeah, it was rough. I was in the video. That was fun. But for like a split second, if you blink, you miss me. But that was cool. And Tyler Sunil does a great job doing the voiceover for those. And if you haven't gone to the Lightning website and in their video section found the Recharge videos, I highly recommend you do, because they're done really, really well. Great insight off the ice in the locker room with our guys. So that being said, I think Orozco kind of beat me to it here. His prediction, 95 points, 3rd in the Atlantic, not really a cup contender, not being mean, just a realist. Yeah, I could see him basically doing a very similar a situation like that of last year, kind of sitting there third in the East. I don't think Boston's going to be able to replicate their season they had last year. We're not even sure what they're going to look like with their cap issues. Toronto has made some moves, but I still think that their head office and their number 34 guy is their biggest issue. So, again, I think the focus for the Lightning really needs to be early on in the season. And focus on just getting better and gelling with some of these new guys on the team, getting them, getting them into the system, getting them into the routine, what it is to be part of that locker room and this community, and just trying to keep their head above water. And then just really it's about making the playoffs, right? This year, keeping Vasi healthier and just trying to find a way in the East to make the playoffs. If Vasi is healthy and that top six can gel with Sherry or Paul, whoever they want to slot into that number 6 spot, I still like this team a lot when it comes to playoff matchups. So that's where I'm sitting. I would say probably 98 points, third in the East. Maybe looking at a wild card spot even this season. But the Cooper effect, I think, is real, though, honestly. As much as everyone talks about, he's just had talent or this and that, I feel like he knows what needs to be done coming into the season with some new blood and some fresh guys, and almost, I think, a bit of a wake-up call after that first series and saying, hey, we played better hockey, but we lost that series, right? I mean, that's pretty much the consensus from everybody in that organization with their exit interviews. And a lot of us, when we talked on the last show of the season, saying, hey, I think we did play better hockey. I think we were the better team and still lost. And you can say that all you want, but the better team doesn't give up multiple goal leads in their own barn in the playoffs. So as much as we outplayed them, they still outscored us. And, as I say, that's what matters, So I still think we have a core team that knows that belief in Coop. I think we still have a captain that is unrivaled in the league. And once again, we shout out to Stammer, who won the Marc Messier Award for Leadership. Well-deserved, absolutely well-deserved. Brandon Point got robbed in the Bing trophy voting. Only got like 15 first-place votes, which is egregious if you ask me. But, yeah, it's still there. The top guys are still there. The Lightning way is still there. John Cooper is still John Cooper. Vasilevsky is still Vasilevsky. And, I think that there's probably going to be a chip on the shoulder of these guys coming into this season, which is something we probably haven't seen since, that 2020 season after that disastrous series against Columbus in the 2019 playoffs. So I think a chip is good for this team. I think that there's going to have to be some leaders stepping up even a little bit more. I personally would like to see, a little bit more of a leadership role on the ice from Kucherov. I know that there's things he does behind the scenes and off the ice, and people just kind of watch him and what he does. But in spite of who he is and where he's from, I think it's important for guys like him that are so good and so dynamic to be a little bit more leadership driven in the locker room. Especially with some of these guys coming in. He's wearing that A now. And, I think that's the thing, as far as the leadership goes. As far as effort, I could not agree more with Matthew Roscoe in the comments. Nick Paul and Anthony Cirelli better bring it night in and night out. I totally agree. First and foremost is Anthony Cirelli absolutely needs to pick it up. That's all there is to it. I just, you go back and you look at kind of what he's done in his career, and I just he I know he was injured coming into last season, and he ended the 21-22 season with a pretty serious injury, but he has to score. I'm sorry, he just being awesome center iceman and guy in the circle and a forechecker, and it isn't enough anymore. Not for what he's making with $6.25 right now. He's making $6.25 million right now. So he's right up there as the 6th highest player on this team, paid player on this team. It's time for him to start putting up points, and specifically goals. If you ask me, he needs to be able to start finishing. I think that the Nick Paul situation is a matter of where he gets put in the lineup. We saw with Cirelli out last season, he was up there with Stamkos and Killorn. Those three guys were freaking lights out. Those guys could have been a top line on any other team in the league right now. At the beginning of last year, those first couple months, they were fantastic. When Cirelli came back in November, it really put Paul in a situation where now he's on that third line. Colton had been regressing. I don't feel like they ever really had a good chemistry on that third line. They never really found what they were looking for there, which I still think was a big problem when it came to the playoffs as well. They were playing those top 6 guys pretty heavily in that series as well. So this is a hot take right here. Todd Stat saying he thinks Sherry put up more points than Cirelli. Well, yeah, because what we were talking about, let's see, we'll swing it back over here real quick. Let's get to the stats here. Yeah, I mean, based on the last 3 seasons, yeah, I would say that he has that opportunity, especially if he's healthy and plays 82 games. And I totally agree. I think anything less than 45 points, Matthew Roscoe in the chat saying so Cirelli has less than 45. If that's the case, that's a disaster. I agree. I'm sorry. When you're talking about this league, no matter what the values are, what people are getting paid, people are saying that Alex Killorn is an overpayment, but Anthony Cirelli is getting paid $6.25 and has only broken 40 points once, right? Let me go back to that real quick. I meant to open a second window, but I didn't. No. Yes. Only 21, 22. So he's had close to 40 points, 3 years, and then we had the shortened season. So I mean, I don't know. He has to be, a 20 and 30 guy. Honestly, I think 20 points, 30 assists, or 20 goals, 30 assists. I think he needs to be at least 50 points a year to be worth what the Lightning are paying him. That's why I still have a problem with it. I've been saying it for 2 years since they gave him that extension, that it was a miss, that it was too much, and he still hadn't earned it and proved it yet. And he only played 58 games last year, 30 points in 58 games. He probably would have had 40 points that he played all 82. Give him another 24 games. I can see he gets another 10 points or so. But I just, it can't be all about the playoffs with him. We need him to be dynamic, second line center that can be a threat to put the puck in the net in the regular season. That top 6 is going to have a lot of work to do in the regular season this year. So Hmm. Don't really have much more to go over here, um, in spite of all of the action. Also, we did talk about this a little bit. I kind of hit on it a little bit, but one of the other moves that was a little bit surprising to some people was that. Let me get to it. It's right here. John Rosso has been promoted to the director of amateur scouting. Al Murray has been assigned, I guess, if you will, as the senior advisor to the general manager, which he's been here for so long. Al Murray has. He's been such a vital part of the way this Lightning has been able to build its team. Um, and but he's been here for a long time, and I think it's probably in his mind that you don't want to be out there. There's a lot of travel. There's a lot of extra things away from the ice that goes into being a scout and a head scout and director of all that. So I think he's kind of on his way to moving towards retirement anyway. So the fact that they're able to keep him as a senior advisor to JBB, I think is good. They'll just be able to work hand in hand a little bit more, and he'll still have his pulse. Al Murray will on all things amateur scouting. So I think it's a good transition. And John Rosso has been here for a while, as it is. He's been right there working hand in hand with Al Murray as well. One more thing, you guys are asking me about the Calvin DeHaan signing. I mean, I think it's definitely an upgrade for Cole, especially at the money. Cole was definitely another overpayment last year, which I think kind of didn't do JBB any favors at the trade deadline, right? Probably why we went out and made that Jeannot deal, overpaid a little bit because because that contract is a little bit big. Here we go. I'm right. Rosso is the one that found Colton and Perbix, and that's pretty solid right there. And we can go and talk about the defense. I guess we haven't talked about it that much. I haven't been focused on the forwards. I wonder why. I don't know why. No, but there was some mentioning out there that Bogosian might have gotten moved, but I don't mind him being that seventh guy, sixth guy, veteran that can go in and be the healthy scratch, or when you've got a tough matchup coming in, he can go out there and still do what Bogosian does. But I personally think that Nick Perbix obviously earned his spot in the top four last year, and I think that gives Darren Radish plenty of time and ability to get in that bottom six and really get that experience. I thought he came in thrown in the fire in the playoffs, never had played in the playoffs at all, and I thought he played really well, especially whenever they were down Hedman and Cernak in that series. He really stepped up and played well. And yeah, another stud. Perbix during the World Cup was just amazing. So I think that defense, again, I'm curious. Like Philip Myers is still a head scratcher to me. I felt like they really had a line and a pulse on him. He's getting paid over $1 million, almost $1.5 million, and he's barely sniffed the ice for the Bolts. And that's a little surprising to me. I thought that they really had, and they talked about him. And they talked about him when they brought him in, saying, "Oh, we have a vision, blah blah." And I honestly thought that was going to be, the sign and trade or the trade and trade or whatever. When we got him, it was going to be part of that package that he was going to get either waived or moved right away. And the fact that he's still around and uh, you know, is strange to me. It's strange to me. It just is. So, and yes, and I will also say, Roscoe is also right that there's a couple of guys in Syracuse that are really close to getting into, a couple of D-man and Felts. And I also wonder somewhat, as we talk about, um, yeah, and 1.4 million extra for Phil Myers for no reason. And man, how much did that money have helped out this year, right? I mean, who knows what that number is between Janot. I mean, whatever, but like that, when you're counting pennies, 1.4 million, that's a lot of fucking pennies, right? So, and I do wonder, going back to this comment from Roscoe about Anfeld being close, I wonder if that Johansson backup goalie move is part of them having the eyes for Anfeld and seeing if maybe he's ready to go ahead and come on up, So, and there's only about $80,000 difference between his contract and Johansson's contract. So, yeah, but again, like I said, why, if they're going to waive him to the minors? I'm sorry, that's a lot of money to be paying a guy in the minors. I'm sorry, if you're making seven figures, that's a kick in the teeth to be sending him down to the minors. That's all I'm saying, right? So, it's here we are, and again, we probably aren't sitting here nitpicking so much if the cap moved the way the cap was supposed to move these last 3 years, but that's not the case. This is where we are, and it's going to be a little bit of a work in progress going through this season, where we've been pretty nice and solid for the last 4 or 5 seasons. We've had one or two guys go here and there, losing Joe and Coleman. Both, that was tough, but they weren't here that long. They did their job and moved on and got their money. That's part of the business sometimes, but it is kind of tough watching guys that been drafted here come up through the system, been part of historical magical runs. It's hard to see those guys go, and I as much as everyone else isn't sold on Alex Killorn or hasn't been over his tenure here, I'm equally as unsold on Cirelli, and I still think he should have been the guy that got traded instead of McDonough. That's all there is to it. I still think he should have been the guy. And it's still interesting. I brought this up last year. I'll say it again. Cirelli is basically the only one of those top guys that doesn't have any type of movement clause whatsoever in his contract. So the Lightning can do anything that they want to with him, and he has zero say in it. So that's just something to keep an eye on. I mean, I know they're incredibly high, obviously, $6.25 million high on Anthony Cirelli. So, yeah. And hey, I get it. I've always thought Killer was more than just his production on the ice, the way a lot of people feel about Anthony Cirelli. But you got guys that are gonna produce certain ways, which is on the ice and not on the ice. So, like I said, I think Cirelli is definitely a top two, a number 2 center in the NHL. But I'm just saying, that's a lot of money for a guy that isn't even hardly sniffing 40 points and 20 goals a season. Like, I think that's a dumb contract. So, and I think in the long run, we definitely saw that Killorn contract, I think, played out the way they hoped it would. I think he easily underperformed the first couple seasons. and then overperform the last couple of seasons. So, um, yeah, that's what everybody said about Sorelli 2 seasons ago when he was healthy. You know I'm right. I'm just telling you. That's all I'm saying, dude. And he has to break out a lot because we're sitting here and all in agreement. Most of us, Todd here also, 6.25 million is a lot for a guy that's not getting 50+ points in this league. Period. Period. That's all there is to it. That's a lot for a guy that is still hasn't reached his potential. 25 years old in the NHL, and he's played 4 full NHL seasons. That's plenty of time, especially on a talented as a team as he's played on. And he had guys like Stamkos and Killorn on his line that were having career seasons again. So I'm talking about the season before last, not this past season whenever he missed the first half of it. I'm talking about the season before that when he had one of his best seasons, and it still was not even he barely had 40 points. So he still hasn't, as far as I'm concerned, done anything to earn more than $4.5 million that he was getting paid before. So, but again, that's the good thing about being a fan is that we all have our opinions. We all have our speculations, and we all, hope for our prognostication to be the right prognostication, right? But I'll tell you right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full seasons. One of them shortened by injury. 2 of them were the COVID years. But I'm sorry, that's enough. That's enough games in the NHL. He's played 352 games. How many more games does he need in the NHL to reach his potential, to have his breakout season? How many more? How many more? It better be this one. That's all I'm saying. It better be this one. And that's all I gotta say about Australia. I don't want to beat a dead horse because again, the guy is awesome. I love him. He's got a great motor. He's got a great heart. Everyone obviously loves Tony. You go in that locker room from top to bottom. That entire roster loves Tony. So I get that. That's important. But cap dollars are important right now too. So. I'm right. I mean, obviously, you're talking about earlier about Sergachev as well, playing his best hockey. I'm still not looking at him as an $8.5 million defenseman yet. So he has to take another big step forward this year. I do think he finally took a big step mentally in his game last year, which I think was the big thing. And I think that now this year we hopefully get to see the mental game and the physical game and scoring and all of it put together, right? Like he's gonna finally get it all put together. He's still only 440 games, which versus a center or a forward, that's a completely different litmus or measuring stick litmus. It's a different situation. So he's still probably about a season and a half away from hitting that 600 game mark that usually is the maturation time for a blue liner in the NHL. They say 600 games or so. But he still had 64 points last year. That's really solid. So now it just has to be the mental part of his game, which we started to see step forward. He's got to stop taking stupid penalties. He's got to stop looking up with the puck on his stick in a certain area. Obviously, you got to keep your head up, but there's a lot of times that he picks his head up a little bit too much, and then he whiffs on a pass, whiffs on a shot, creates a little bit of a turnover and puts his guys in a bad situation. Those are the things he needs to nip in the bud. That consistency, I think, makes him, a premier defenseman in this league already, and he's only 25. That's young for a defenseman in the NHL. Whereas I think, as a forward, if you've played for over 400 games, you should already pretty much be reaching what your average or what your level, your ceiling is, or what your level of your game is going to be, in the NHL. At 25, 440 games, I still think there's some time to learn from him. But the great thing about him is, he's shown that he's healthy. He hasn't missed a lot of games to injury, and that's a good thing. That's the thing you want to see out of a guy like that. He's not going to have money on your bench or in the locker room, or is not going to be injured. So that's a big deal. So yeah, I honestly think the defense is probably in better shape this year than it was going into the season last year. Personally, we had some question marks. I think bigger question marks last year than we do this year. So this is one of the key things. Can Jeannot get back to scoring 15, 20 goals? I think consistency is key for some of these lineups and some of these guys. I think as much as Cooper likes to go through the season and kind of, we're kind of playing for the future and seeing this chemistry and getting these guys on the ice together and this and that, I really think about this season needing more consistency, especially in that bottom six. Those guys need to know who they're playing with every night, what their roles are every shift, and they need to have the ability to put the extra work on off the ice to really get their game to where the Lightning needed to be from those bottom six guys. I do think that if you put Sherry on that top six, then you've got a third line potentially of Paul, Eyssimont, and Jeannot. And yeah, I could see that being a very productive third line. And all three of those guys having 15 plus goals this year, honestly. So yeah, to me, that's really the big question mark still. I talked about at the beginning. Will Jeannot sign? Can JBB get that done? But yeah, I think that we still have a great third line possibility with what we saw out of Eyssimont. And Nick Paul I think for him it's consistency. It's him. He's one of those guys that I just need to know what my job is every night and kind of keep it the same every night. We've had those guys on the roster that can kind of flip around and play this and play that and do this and do that. But I really think the thing that Cooper needs to focus on this year, especially the first half of the season at least, is consistency. Get those guys locked in 1 through 12. Let them know who they're skating with every night, except for the healthy scratch nights and who needs some day off and this and that, body maintenance, yada, yada. But I think that's the key to getting out to the right start this season. So that being said, here we are. We're right about that hour mark where we like to keep the shows. If you guys are still around, I really appreciate you joining me tonight. I'm sorry I didn't plan it far enough ahead, but I was really happy to have those of you join me that did. Stache Talk is going to probably be my new solo thing that I do as of right now with nothing else going on. I'll just hop on here every Monday at 9 o'clock. Probably won't just be about hockey right now. Obviously, it's 4th of July. I'm repping my USA Rays hat. So we definitely can talk a little bit about baseball and the Rays, what they're doing coming up. The All-Star break's coming up pretty soon. There's some other stuff going around the NHL. I wouldn't mind touching on a couple of other teams as well, some of the moves they made, what it's going to look like in the East once we get through this next week or two, and pretty much the free agency window is pretty much done. The early window, we'll know a lot more about where these teams are, where our team stands, what it looks like in the East, what it looks like in the Atlantic, and and where we stand there. And hopefully by next Monday we'll know what's up with Jeannot. Jeannot, we need Jeannot to know. So that being said, we will definitely talk about the Rays and their bullpen and what they need to be looking at coming up to the trade deadline. And they better be buyers with the 28th lowest payroll in Major League Baseball and the #1 team in baseball. So yeah, I'm working on some production stuff as far as intros and outros, and that was Shooter's specialty. I don't really have an update on that or what We the Thunder is going to be starting next season. Maybe we'll start talking about that a little more, but I'm just really not trying to focus too much on that right now. Just gotta do my thing, and love being here talking to you guys and ladies, you lads and ladies of the Tampa Bay area about all things Tampa Bay. So that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. And if you guys want, go ahead and you can hit me up on Sure in the Stache, or most of you guys know me personally over on my own Facebook page, Philip Haney, and you guys can shoot me some messages or Facebook message and let me know what topics you guys maybe want to talk about, what kind of stash you want to talk. So thanks for that. I hope you guys have a great week. Hope you have a great 4th of July tomorrow. We got started earlier this weekend, and I still got a lot more shit to blow up tomorrow, so I'm excited about it. This has been Stache Talk. We'll see you next week.